In a small, quiet town surrounded by green fields and tall trees, there lived a young boy named Ethan. He was just 12 years old, but already known for his sharp mind and curious nature. Ethan loved reading books. Anything from science fiction to history fascinated him. But life wasn't easy for Ethan or his mom. After his dad passed away 2 years ago, they had been struggling to make ends meet. His mom worked long hours at a local diner, trying her best to provide for them, but money was always tight. Ethan didn't complain. He knew how hard his mom worked, and he tried to help out wherever he could. Every morning he would pack his bag with the same clothes he wore almost every day, a pair of faded blue jeans, an old jacket patched up by his mom, and sneakers that were held together with duct tape. To Ethan, these clothes weren't just fabric. They were reminders of his mom's love and effort. But not everyone saw it that way. One chilly Monday morning, Ethan walked into Maplewood Middle School like any other day. The hallways buzzed with kids chatting about their weekends, showing off new sneakers or comparing notes on the latest video games. Ethan kept to himself, heading straight to class. He didn't care much about what others thought of him. He was more focused on acing his math test later that day. But during lunch break, something unexpected happened. A teacher came to Ethan's classroom and asked him to follow her to the principal's office. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What did I do, he wondered. As far as he knew, he hadn't broken any rules. Still, he followed the teacher silently, clutching his backpack straps nervously. When Ethan stepped into the principal's office, he found Principal Hayes sitting behind her desk, looking stern as usual. She was a tall woman, with sharp features, and a no-nonsense attitude. Kids often whispered about how strict she was, but Ethan had never really interacted with her before. Today, though, things were different. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the chair across from her. Her tone was cold, making Ethan feel even more uneasy. Once he sat, she leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. You think this is appropriate attire for school?" she asked suddenly, gesturing toward his worn-out jeans and scuffed sneakers. Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. Yes, ma'am," he stammered. "These are my only clothes." Principal Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Only clothes? Surely, you have something better than this. You're representing our school, young man. If you can't present yourself properly, how do you expect others to take you seriously?" Ethan opened his mouth to explain further, but the words caught in his throat. How could he tell her about the nights his mom spent sewing patches onto his jacket because they couldn't afford new ones? Or about the fact that his sneakers were the only pair he owned, handed down from a neighbor's son? Before he could say anything, Principal Hayes slid a piece of paper across the desk. "This is your suspension slip," she said firmly. "You may return to school when you're dressed appropriately." Ethan stared at the slip, his heart sinking. Suspended for wearing old clothes, it felt so unfair. He wanted to argue, to beg her to reconsider, but he knew it wouldn't change her mind. Instead, he stood up quietly, grabbed the slip, and left the office without another word. The walk home felt longer than usual. Each step seemed heavier than the last. When Ethan finally reached his house, his mom was in the kitchen washing dishes. She turned around when she heard the door close and immediately noticed the look on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, drying her hands on a towel. Ethan handed her the suspension slip, tears welling up in his eyes. "They suspended me because of my clothes." His mom read the note, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. Then sadness washed over her as she hugged Ethan tightly. "This isn't right," she whispered. "No one should treat you this way." That night, after dinner, Ethan lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Was it really his fault? Should he have done something differently? The questions swirled in his mind until exhaustion finally pulled him into sleep. Little did Ethan know, his story was about to take a turn none of them could have predicted. The next morning, fueled by frustration and a desire to be heard, Ethan decided to share his experience online. He snapped a picture of the suspension slip and typed out a heartfelt message explaining his situation. Within minutes of posting, replies started pouring in, from friends, classmates, and even strangers who were outraged by what had happened. By the end of the day, Ethan's post had gone viral. Thousands of people shared it, tagging news outlets and calling for justice. Comments flooded in, some offering support, others expressing disbelief at the principal's decision. It was clear that Ethan's story had struck a chord with people, everywhere. What happened next would change everything, not just for Ethan, but for the entire town. The morning after Ethan posted his story online, the small town woke up to a buzz unlike anything it had ever experienced. People were talking about the boy who got suspended for wearing old clothes. Word spread fast, not just locally, but across the state and even beyond. Social media played its part, amplifying Ethan's voice until it reached corners of the world he'd never imagined. Ethan himself didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what was happening at first. He woke up early, as usual, expecting another quiet day at home. But when he checked his phone, his screen lit up with notifications, hundreds of them. Messages from strangers filled his inbox, each one carrying words of encouragement, outrage, or offers to help. Some shared their own stories of being judged for their appearance, while others simply thanked him for speaking out. For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. But it wasn't just individuals reacting. Local news stations picked up the story, sending reporters to Maplewood Middle School to investigate. Parents gathered outside the gates, some holding signs that read, "Every child deserves respect," and "Clothes don't define character." Teachers whispered among themselves during breaks, unsure whether to side with the principal or support. The growing movement backing Ethan. The entire community seemed divided, yet united by the sheer shock of what had happened. Amidst all this chaos, an unexpected ally emerged. A retired military officer turned advocate heard about Ethan's situation through social media. This man had dedicated his post-service life to helping underprivileged children, believing deeply that every kid deserved a fair shot at success. When he saw Ethan's story, something stirred inside him, a mix of anger and determination. He knew he couldn't sit back and do nothing. That same afternoon, the advocate arrived in town. He didn't come alone. With him was a group of volunteers, former service members, teachers, and ordinary people who believed in standing up for those without a voice. They parked near the school, unfurled banners, and began handing out flyers to passers-by. Their message was simple: no child should face humiliation because of their circumstances. Principal Hayes watched nervously from her office window as the crowd grew larger. She hadn't anticipated such backlash. In her mind, she'd only been enforcing rules meant to maintain discipline and professionalism. But now, staring at the sea of faces chanting slogans and holding signs, she realized she might have miscalculated badly. By late afternoon, the situation escalated further. Journalists swarmed the area, microphones in hand, eager to capture sound bites from anyone willing to speak. Students poured out of classrooms once the final bell rang, many joining the protest despite the risk of getting into trouble. Even some parents who initially supported the principal started questioning her decision after seeing how much attention the issue had garnered. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed home, glued to the TV. Every channel seemed to be covering the story. Reporters interviewed students, teachers, and townsfolk, asking for their opinions on the suspension. One reporter even knocked on Ethan's door, hoping to speak with him directly. His mom politely declined, saying her son needed time to process everything. As night fell, the energy outside the school shifted. The protests quieted down, but the conversation continued online. People debated passionately, sharing articles, memes, and personal anecdotes. Some defended the principal, arguing that schools needed standards, while others condemned her actions as heartless and discriminatory. Amidst all the noise, one thing became clear. Ethan's suspension had ignited a national discussion about fairness, empathy, and the kind of values society wanted to instill in its youth. Back at the school, Principal Hayes sat alone in her office, staring blankly at her computer screen. Her inbox was flooded with emails, angry messages from parents, concerned letters from alumni, and official inquiries from the school board. She felt trapped, overwhelmed by the weight of public opinion, crashing down on her. Yet deep down, a small part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. Unbeknownst to her, plans were already underway to address the growing unrest. The advocate who had arrived earlier that day was organizing a meeting with local leaders, educators, and parents. Together, they hoped to find a solution that would not only resolve the immediate crisis but also prevent similar incidents in the future. For Ethan, the whirlwind of events was both exhilarating and exhausting. On one hand, he felt vindicated, knowing that so many people cared about his plight. On the other hand, he worried about what this meant for his future at Maplewood Middle School. Would things go back to normal? Or had his life changed forever? Little did he know the next chapter of his story was about to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. While the protests simmered overnight, preparations were being made for an event that would leave the entire town, and perhaps the nation, speechless. The next morning, the town woke up to a sight that no one could have imagined. As the sun rose over the sleepy streets of Maplewood, a low rumble echoed through the air. At first, people thought it was thunder, but as they stepped outside, they realized it was something far more extraordinary. Rolling down the main road was a convoy, dozens of vehicles stretching as far as the eye could see. Leading the procession were 3 massive armored trucks, their sides painted with bold letters. Guardians of Hope. Word spread quickly. Neighbors peeked out of windows. Drivers pulled over to gawk, and kids ran into the streets pointing excitedly at the unusual parade. The convoy moved slowly, deliberately, until it reached its destination, Maplewood Middle School. When the IRS engines finally cut off, the crowd that had gathered around the school erupted into murmurs of curiosity and awe. Out of one of the trucks stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp uniform. His presence commanded respect, but his eyes carried a warmth that put people at ease. He wasn't here to intimidate. He was here to make a statement. Behind him came volunteers, each carrying boxes filled with supplies. There were stacks of new clothes, pairs of sturdy sneakers, backpacks stuffed with notebooks and pens, and even laptops wrapped carefully in protective cases. It was clear this wasn't just a random act of generosity. It was a calculated move to address the very issue that had sparked outrage across the nation. The retired military officer who led the group stepped forward, holding a megaphone. "Good morning, Maplewood," he said, his voice steady but kind. "We're here today because we heard about a boy who was treated unfairly. A boy who reminded us that every child deserves dignity, no matter what they wear or where they come from." The crowd cheered and cameras flashed as reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Students pressed against the school gates, whispering among themselves. Some recognized the man from the previous day's protest. Others were seeing him for the first time. But everyone felt the same thing, a mix of excitement and disbelief. Could this really be happening? Principal Hayes watched from her office window, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the edge of her desk. She hadn't expected anything like this. Yesterday's protests had been unsettling enough, but today's display was overwhelming. The sheer scale of it, the trucks, the supplies, the crowd, made her feel small, almost insignificant. For the first time, she began to wonder if she'd misjudged not just the situation with Ethan, but also the power of public opinion. As the advocate continued speaking, he turned his attention directly toward the school building. "This isn't just about one student," he declared, his voice growing louder. "It's about all students. Every child deserves to walk into school feeling valued, not judged. And if the system fails them, then it's our job to step in and remind them that they matter." With that, he motioned for the volunteers to open the boxes. One by one, students were invited onto the lawn to pick out clothes, shoes, and supplies. The scene was chaotic but joyful. Kids laughed as they tried on sneakers, held up jackets to check the fit, and marveled at the shiny new laptops. Parents wiped away tears, grateful for the unexpected support. Teachers stood nearby, some clapping, others quietly reflecting on how quickly things had changed. Ethan, meanwhile, stayed home, unsure whether to join the gathering. His mom encouraged him to go, telling him it was okay to accept help when it was offered. Reluctantly, he agreed. When he arrived, the crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. Everyone knew who he was now, the boy whose courage had brought this incredible moment to life. Volunteers greeted him warmly, handing him a brand new jacket and a pair of sneakers that fit perfectly. For the first time in days, Ethan smiled, not just because of the gifts, but because he finally felt seen. While the students celebrated, Principal Hayes remained inside, pacing nervously. She wanted to ignore the commotion, to pretend it wasn't happening, but she couldn't. Eventually, she decided to step outside, hoping to regain some control over the situation. As soon as she appeared, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations paused, and all eyes turned to her. Some glared, others simply stared, waiting to see what she would do next. The advocate approached her, extending a hand. "Ma'am," he said firmly but respectfully, "I think it's time we talk." Hayes hesitated before shaking his hand. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tinged with defensiveness. "I want to understand why a child was punished, for something beyond his control," the man replied. "And I want to work together to ensure this never happens again." For a moment, Hayes didn't respond. She looked around at the sea of faces, young and old, rich and poor, united by a shared sense of purpose. Then she glanced at Ethan, standing awkwardly near the edge of the crowd, clutching his new jacket like it was a lifeline. Something inside her softened. Maybe, just maybe, she had let pride get in the way of compassion. "Let's talk," she said finally, gesturing toward the school doors. Inside her office, the conversation was tense but honest. The advocate listened patiently as Hayes explained her reasoning for suspending Ethan, though her arguments sounded weak even to her own ears. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't mince words. "Rules are important," he admitted. "But so is understanding. You can't enforce standards without considering the human element. These kids aren't statistics. They're people with dreams, fears, and struggles you might not always see." By the end of the meeting, Hayes seemed shaken but resolved. She agreed to meet with parents, teachers, and students to discuss changes that needed to be made. Uniform policies would be reviewed, counseling services expanded, and resources provided to families in need. It wouldn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. Outside, the celebration continued. Volunteers handed out flyers announcing the launch of a nationwide initiative aimed at supporting underprivileged children. Local businesses pledged donations, and community leaders promised to keep the momentum going. By the time the sun set, Maplewood Middle School looked different, not just physically with banners celebrating diversity hanging from the walls, but emotionally too. A seed of change had been planted, and it was already beginning to grow. Ethan walked home that evening. Wearing his new clothes and carrying a backpack full of supplies, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, pride, gratitude, and yes, still a little fear about what lay ahead. But for the first time in a long, while he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The days following the arrival of the armored convoy brought a whirlwind of change to Maplewood Middle School. Principal Hayes, once known for her rigid adherence to rules, found herself at the center of an emotional storm. The meeting with the retired military officer had left her shaken, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about her leadership style. For the first time in years, she began questioning whether her decisions truly served the students or merely upheld appearances. At first, Hayes struggled to adapt. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone outside the education system. But as she spent more time listening to parents, teachers, and even students, a shift started to occur within her. She realized that while rules were important, they meant little if they didn't consider the humanity behind them. Kids weren't just numbers on a report card. They were individuals with unique stories, struggles, and dreams. And Ethan's story had reminded her of that in a way nothing else could. One morning, Hayes called an assembly. The entire school gathered in the gymnasium, buzzing with curiosity. Rumors had been swirling about what might happen next. Would there be new policies? Would the principal apologize? No one knew for sure. When Hayes stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She looked out at the sea of faces, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I owe you all an apology," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "What happened with Ethan was wrong. I let my focus on rules blind me to the real needs of our students. That ends now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some students exchanged surprised glances, while others sat quietly, waiting to hear more. Hayes went on to outline the changes she planned to implement. Uniform policies would no longer exist, at least not in the strict sense. Instead, the school would launch a free wardrobe program, ensuring every student had access to clean, comfortable clothes regardless of their financial situation. Counseling services would expand, offering support not just academically but emotionally as well. Most importantly, Hayes promised to create a culture where kindness and understanding took priority over perfection. Her speech earned mixed reactions. Some students clapped enthusiastically, thrilled to see their principal acknowledge past mistakes. Others remained skeptical, wondering if these promises would actually lead to meaningful change. Teachers, too, were divided. While many appreciated Hayes' willingness to evolve, some worried that loosening certain rules might create chaos. Still, the overall mood in the school shifted noticeably. There was hope in the air, a fragile, tentative hope, but hope nonetheless. For Ethan, life began improving almost immediately. With his new clothes and supplies, he felt less self-conscious walking into class. His classmates treated him differently too, not with pity, but with admiration. They saw him as someone who had stood up against unfairness and inspired a movement bigger than anyone expected. Even kids who hadn't paid much attention to him before started sitting with him at lunch, asking questions about his experience and sharing their own struggles. But Ethan wasn't the only one benefiting from the changes. Other students whose families faced similar challenges began coming forward, seeking help without fear of judgment. One boy, whose shoes had holes so big his socks showed through, finally accepted a pair of sneakers from the wardrobe program, after months of refusing assistance. A girl who often missed school because she couldn't afford feminine hygiene products learned about a new initiative providing free supplies discreetly. Slowly but surely, the stigma surrounding poverty began to fade. Meanwhile, the retired military officer continued playing a key role in transforming the school. He organized workshops for teachers and staff, teaching them how to recognize signs of hardship in students and respond with empathy rather than punishment. He also worked closely with Hayes, guiding her as she navigated this unfamiliar territory. Their relationship evolved from adversarial to collaborative, built on mutual respect and a shared goal, creating a better environment for every child. Outside the school, the ripple effects grew wider. Local businesses donated funds and resources, inspired by the national attention the story had received. Parents volunteered their time to help run the wardrobe program, sorting clothes and organizing distributions. Community leaders held meetings to discuss ways to address systemic issues affecting low-income families. It was as if the entire town had come together, united by a common purpose. Even the media played a role in keeping the momentum alive. Reporters returned to Maplewood multiple times, documenting the progress and highlighting success stories. One segment featured a shy sixth grader who had blossomed after receiving tutoring and emotional support. Another showcased a single mother who broke down in tears describing how the wardrobe program eased her burden. These stories humanized the effort, reminding viewers everywhere that behind every statistic was a real person with real needs. Weeks turned into months. The transformation at Maplewood Middle School became undeniable. Attendance rates improved, disciplinary incidents dropped, and test scores rose slightly. All signs that students felt safer, supported, and more motivated to succeed. But perhaps the most significant change was harder to measure: the sense of belonging that filled the halls. Kids laughed more, helped each other more, and spoke openly about their feelings without fear of ridicule. Teachers noticed it, parents noticed it, and even visitors commented on the positive energy radiating from the building. Of course, challenges remained. Not everyone embraced the changes wholeheartedly. Some parents grumbled about the relaxed dress code, insisting it set a bad example. A few teachers resisted attending the empathy workshops, claiming they didn't have time. And occasionally, Old habits resurfaced, like when a substitute teacher scolded a student for wearing mismatched socks unaware of the new policies. But each setback was met with patience and perseverance. Hayes made it clear that progress wouldn't happen overnight, but she vowed to keep pushing forward. By the end of the school year, Maplewood Middle School had become a symbol of resilience and renewal. Visitors came from neighboring towns to learn about its programs, hoping to replicate them elsewhere. Educators praised Hayes for her courage in admitting fault and embracing change. Students like Ethan became ambassadors for the cause, sharing their experiences at conferences and inspiring others to speak out against injustice. And yet, despite all the accolades, Hayes never forgot why the changes had been necessary in the first place. Late at night, when the school was quiet and empty, she sometimes sat in her office staring at the photo of Ethan pinned to her bulletin board. It served as a reminder, not just of her mistake, but of the power of second chances. Little did she or anyone else know, the story of Maplewood Middle School was far from over. In fact, it was only the beginning of something much bigger. Across the country, schools facing similar challenges began reaching out, eager to learn how they, too, could foster environments rooted in compassion and dignity. What started as a single act of courage had ignited a chain reaction, proving that even the smallest voices could spark revolutions. Ethan, meanwhile, continued thriving. He threw himself into his studies, determined to make the most of the opportunities now available to him. Yet he never lost sight of the lessons he'd learned along the way, that standing up for yourself wasn't just about winning, it was about creating space for others to stand too. As the years rolled by, Maplewood Middle School continued to evolve into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The changes that began with Ethan's suspension didn't just fade away. They took root and grew stronger, spreading their influence far beyond the small town. The retired military officer who had spearheaded the effort became a household name, not because of his past accomplishments, but because of the work he did for kids like Ethan. His organization, Guardians of Hope, expanded rapidly, reaching schools in cities and rural areas alike, offering resources and guidance to communities struggling with similar issues. For Ethan, life transformed in ways he never thought possible. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. With access to better clothing, school supplies, and emotional support, he found himself excelling academically. Teachers noticed his sharp mind and encouraged him to aim high. By the time he reached high school, Ethan was at the top of his class, earning awards and scholarships that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. But it wasn't just about grades. Ethan developed confidence he hadn't known before. He started speaking up more, not just for himself, but for others who felt overlooked or judged. One day, during his junior year of high school, Ethan stood on stage as part of a panel discussion hosted by Guardians of Hope. The event brought together students, educators, and community leaders from across the country to talk about how schools could become safer, kinder spaces for all children. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he gripped the microphone tightly, his hands trembling slightly. Despite having told his story countless times over the years, this moment felt different. This time, he wasn't just sharing his experience, he was challenging everyone in the room to do better. "I didn't ask for any of this," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I didn't wake up one morning and decide I wanted to be the face of some big movement. All I wanted was to go to school without feeling ashamed of what I wore. But when people heard my story, they saw something bigger than me. They saw a chance to make things right, for me, for other kids like me, and for future generations." The audience listened intently, many nodding along as Ethan spoke. He talked about the pain of being suspended, the humiliation of being judged for his clothes, and the overwhelming support he received afterward. But he also emphasized the importance of resilience and courage. "It's easy to stay quiet when you're scared," he said. "But sometimes, staying quiet means letting unfairness win. I learned that standing up doesn't always mean shouting. It can mean simply refusing to back down even when it feels like the whole world is against you." When Ethan finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People lined up afterward to thank him, shaking his hand and telling him how much his words meant to them. For Ethan, it was both humbling and empowering. He realized that while his journey had been difficult, it had given him a platform to inspire others, and that made every hardship worth it. Back at Maplewood Middle School, the legacy of those early days lived on. Principal Hayes, once seen as the antagonist in Ethan's story, had undergone her own transformation. She no longer ruled with an iron fist. Instead, she led with empathy and understanding. Her office, once a place where students dreaded being called, became a safe space where kids felt comfortable opening up about their struggles. Hayes attended conferences and workshops regularly, eager to learn new ways to support her students. Over time, she earned back the trust she had lost, becoming a respected figure in the education community. The changes implemented under her leadership weren't just superficial, they were deeply ingrained in the school's culture. Uniform policies remained relaxed, allowing students to express themselves freely. Counseling services expanded, providing mental health support tailored to individual needs. And the free wardrobe program continued to thrive, thanks to ongoing donations from local businesses and community members. Every year, the school held a Day of Dignity, inviting families to pick out clothes, participate in workshops, and celebrate the progress they had made together. Even the physical appearance of the school reflected its evolution. Murals covered the walls, each one painted by students and depicting themes of diversity, kindness, and resilience. One mural featured a boy wearing patched-up jeans, standing tall amidst a crowd of cheering classmates. It was clear to anyone who visited that Maplewood Middle Stairix wasn't just a building, it was a beacon of hope. Word of the school's success spread far and wide. Educators from other districts traveled to Maplewood to observe its programs and take notes. Some returned home inspired, ready to implement similar initiatives in their own schools. Others collaborated directly with Guardians of Hope, forming partnerships that strengthened communities nationwide. The ripple effect of Ethan's story continued to grow, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. By the time Ethan graduated high school, he had become a symbol of perseverance and change. On graduation day, as he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the crowd erupted in cheers. His mom sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she clapped louder than anyone else. Afterward, during his valedictorian speech, Ethan thanked everyone who had supported him along the way. From his mom to the volunteers who showed up with armored trucks, to the teachers and principal who helped turn his life around. "This isn't just my story," he said, looking out at the sea of faces. "It's our story. It's proof that when we come together, we can overcome anything. We can turn pain into purpose, fear into courage, and judgment into compassion." His words resonated deeply, not just with his classmates but with everyone watching online. Clips of his speech went viral, reminding viewers everywhere of the power of unity and determination. For Ethan, it was the perfect ending to a chapter of his life, but he knew it was only the beginning of something much bigger. As for Principal Hayes, she watched Ethan's speech with pride, knowing she had played a role in shaping the young man he had become. Though she still carried guilt for her past actions, she found solace in the fact that she had used her second chance wisely. She often reminded herself and others that true leadership wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about owning those mistakes and using them as stepping stones toward growth. Years later, when visitors came to Maplewood Middle School, they couldn't help but notice the plaque mounted near the entrance. It read, "Dedicated to the day dignity triumphed over judgment." Below it was a photo of Ethan, smiling brightly as he accepted a brand new jacket from a volunteer. The plaque served as a reminder, a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark revolutions, changing lives one heart at a time. And so, the story of Maplewood Middle School lived on, not just as a tale of one boy's courage, but as a lesson for the world. It taught us that fairness begins with empathy, that rules should serve humanity rather than suppress it, and that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow. Years passed, and the story of Maplewood Middle School became more than just a memory. It became a legacy. The changes that began with Ethan's suspension didn't fade into obscurity. Instead, they grew stronger, shaping not only the lives of those directly involved, but also inspiring countless others far beyond the town's borders. What started as one boy's fight for dignity turned into a movement that touched hearts, challenged systems, and sparked conversations about fairness and compassion in schools everywhere. Ethan, now grown, found himself reflecting on his journey. Often, life after high school had been full of opportunities he never dreamed possible. Thanks to scholarships earned through hard work and determination, he attended a prestigious university where he studied education policy. His goal was clear: to ensure no child would ever feel the way he did back in middle school. He wanted to create a world where every student could walk into class feeling valued, respected, and seen, not judged by their appearance or circumstances. During college, Ethan stayed connected to Guardians of Hope, the organization that had played such a pivotal role in his life. He traveled across the country speaking at conferences, visiting schools, and meeting kids who reminded him of his younger self. These interactions kept him grounded, reminding him why his voice mattered. Each time he shared his story, he saw the same spark of hope in the eyes of listeners, young and old alike. It was a reminder that courage is contagious, and even the smallest act of standing up can inspire others to do the same. One of Ethan's proudest moments came during his final year of university when he helped launch a nationwide initiative called Operation Second Chance. The program focused on training educators and administrators to recognize and address the unique challenges faced by low-income students. Workshops emphasized empathy over punishment, encouraging teachers to look beyond behavior and focus on understanding the root causes of struggles. Schools participating in the program reported remarkable improvements: higher attendance rates, fewer disciplinary incidents, and increased academic performance. For Ethan, it was proof that change was possible when people worked together toward a common goal. Back in Maplewood, the town continued to thrive under the shadow of its newfound reputation. Once known for little more than its quiet streets and rolling fields, it became a symbol of resilience and renewal. Visitors frequently stopped by to tour the middle school, marveling at how much it had transformed over the years. The murals painted by students still adorned the walls, vibrant and alive with messages of hope and unity. The plaque near the entrance remained a popular spot for photos, serving as a constant reminder of the power of collective action. Principal Hayes, now retired, spent her days volunteering at local schools, sharing her experiences with aspiring educators. She often spoke candidly about her mistakes, urging young leaders to prioritize humanity over rigid rules. "It's easy to enforce policies," she'd say during workshops, "but it takes real strength to listen, to adapt, and to put the needs of your students first." Her honesty earned her respect, and many looked to her as a model of growth and redemption. The retired military officer who had once led the convoy to Maplewood remained deeply involved in advocacy work. Though his hair had grayed and his steps slowed with age, his passion for helping children burned as brightly as ever. Under his leadership, Guardians of Hope expanded globally, reaching countries where poverty and inequality hindered access to education. Yet despite the organization's success, he always credited Ethan for igniting the spark that fueled its mission. "He reminded us what really matters," the officer often said. "Every child deserves a fair shot, regardless of where they come from." For Ethan, the culmination of his efforts came on a crisp autumn morning several years later. Standing before a packed auditorium at a national education summit, he delivered a keynote speech that left the audience breathless. Dressed in a tailored suit, a far cry from the worn jeans he once wore, he spoke passionately about the importance of creating inclusive environments in schools. "When I was 12 years old," he began, his voice steady and strong, "I thought my life was defined by what I lacked. I didn't have new clothes, shiny sneakers, or fancy gadgets like some of my classmates. But what I did have was a mom who loved me, a mind hungry for knowledge, and a stubborn refusal to let anyone tell me I wasn't good enough. Those things carried me through, and they're what drive me today." Ethan went on to describe the ripple effects of his story, highlighting examples of schools and communities that had embraced change because of Maplewood's example. He talked about the students he'd met along the way, kids who had overcome incredible odds to pursue their dreams. And he urged everyone in the room to keep pushing for progress, no matter how daunting the challenges might seem. Change doesn't happen overnight, he said, pausing to let his words sink in. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful, but it's worth it. Because when we choose kindness over judgment, empathy over indifference, and action over silence, we give kids the tools they need to build brighter futures for themselves and for the world. When Ethan finished speaking, the crowd rose to their feet, applauding long after he stepped off the stage. Parents hugged their children tighter, teachers wiped away tears, and strangers exchanged smiles, united by a shared sense of purpose. That night, social media buzzed with clips of Ethan's speech, reigniting discussions about equity and justice in education. Once again, his story proved that even the smallest voices could echo across generations. As Ethan walked out of the auditorium, he paused for a moment, looking up at the stars twinkling in the night sky. He thought about the boy he used to be, the one who felt invisible, unworthy, and alone. Then he thought about the man he had become, confident, resilient, and determined to make a difference. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. And somewhere in the quiet corners of Maplewood Middle School, the echoes of that journey lingered. In the laughter of students playing in the halls, in the pride of teachers watching their pupils succeed, and in the memories of a community that refused to give up, the spirit of change lived on. It was a testament to the idea that even in the face of adversity, hope could triumph, and that true revolutions begin not with armies or weapons, but with hearts brave enough to believe in a better tomorrow.